Well, howdy, partner. It's Dev, and it's Trusty Steed the Chicken. Try not to think about that image for too long. We're from Mtg, and it is the first day of Outlaws at Thunder Junction previews. Baby, I didn't have a cowboy hat, so I wore my silliest hair. But that's not what it's about. You're here to see new cards, and there's 50 of them, so we can't really waste too much time. Let's go ahead and start looking at them. Actually, though, there is one more thing. Don't worry, not a sponsorship. You're going to like it, because this time I decided since there's like 50 cards in this first video of the season, we should just do like a handy dandy guide over here. These are timestamps if you want to see specific cards or mostly rarities or cards I think are actually important or whatever. Here's the timestamps over here. But as usual, we're going to start with the commons. There's not too many of them today, but some of them that we saw are good and allow us a chance to like introduce new mechanics. For instance, Trained Arynx and Quilled Charger right here on your screen. Now, Arynx is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 3/1 creature. It's a cat beast mount. See? People ride cats. It's not that weird, right, chicken? Whenever Trained Arynx attacks while saddled, it gains first strike until end of turn. Scry 1. Now, what is this? What are you talking about? Saddle 2 is the ability this thing has. Tap any number of other creatures you control with total power 2 or more. This mount becomes saddled till end of turn. Saddle only as a sorcery, so that is really, really, really familiar to crewing stuff. Basically, it's like a vehicle where the vehicle's already a creature. It's just like you get benefits for crewing your guy. It's kind of stupid. You can only do it as a sorcery, but still, you know, this allows us some design space that we're already a little bit familiar with, and I kind of like it as an idea, but this card is just kind of okay. Like, I don't really feel like tapping down a 2-power guy just so I can attack with my 3/1 safely. Draft card. So let's move on to Quilled Charger, which is also kind of a draft card, but we got to look at these. 4 mana, 3 and a red for a 4/3 Porcupine Mount. Seems like you wouldn't want to do that. Chicken is going crazy behind me. Anyway, whenever Quilled Charger attacks while saddled, it gets +1/+2 and gains menace until end of turn. You can saddle it for 2 as well. So that's also not amazing, but we're introducing the concept of saddle here. See, you saddle creatures, and then good things happen. But in some cases, it's not. The good stuff isn't really enough, and I think that this is one of those cards. But there were only 4 more commons to look at from the whole set of 50 cards. There are a lot of mythics today. We'll get there, but either way, we got to look at Cactarantula. That's a great name. Armored Armadillo, okay, and Holy Cow. There's one more common after this, but it's like way better and might actually see some standard play. So we'll look at it in a second. But first, Cactarantula. Love it. 6 mana, 4 and 2 green for a 6/5 plant spider that costs 1 less to cast if you control a desert. They are doing deserts in this set, so I guess this is a mechanic card. Either way, this spider has reach because it's a spider, and whenever it becomes a target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. Love that it's a may ability. Like, nah, I don't really feel like it. I got no cards left. But in that like 1 in a million chance, I got a Cactarantula and 0 cards in my library, baby. But either way, it's a cool card. I like that it's also it's a cactus that's a spider. That's the whole point of the card, is like, isn't this cool? When I first read it this morning, I thought that it cost 1 less to cast for each desert, and I got like halfway excited, but no, it just like costs 5 to cast. Which I guess like 5 mana for a 6/5 reach. It's not good to stop. Armored Armadillo is another card I have to stop myself from liking. First of all, because it's adorable. How have we not had a card named this yet? It just seems right. They couldn't wait for Bloomburrow to do this guy, right? They just had to do it in this. Just a single white mana for a 0/4 Armadillo with Ward 1. You can also pay 3 and a white to have it get +X+0 till end of turn, where X is its toughness. Okay, so you got a little 1 mana 0/4 in standard. Is that like... Not good. It's probably not good. I mean, I keep thinking cards might be okay. I mean, 1 mana 0/4 Ward 1, that's okay. If your opponent actually has to remove it, they're kind of embarrassed, You have to apologize to them. Like, sorry you had to remove that guy. I know he's ridiculous. Still, I think this guy's like kind of neat. A 1 mana 0/4 is at least like something you could do in draft, I guess. We got Toughness Matters decks with like the turtle in standard right now. Who knows, right? I know it's not good, but still, I like the guy. I can like cards. Moving on to Holy Cow. Look at this guy right here. 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 2/2 Ox Angel with flash and flying. When Holy Cow enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life and scry 1, an inspiring oversteer. Sorry, you're going to have to deal with cow jokes this season. This is not amazing, but it is a flying cow with flash. Hey, it's got flash. Like a halfway decent enter the battlefield trigger too. So I guess like I'll put it on the fine shelf, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to see too much play. It is utterly ridiculous. How many times can I use that joke this season? I should really I should really holster that one for now. But the best comment of the day, I think by a pretty good margin, is Hard Bristle Bandit. This is 2 mana. I'm going to use that voice a lot this season too, aren't I? It's 1 and a green for a 1/1 plant rogue. You can tap it to add a mana of any color. And whenever you commit a crime, untap Hard Bristle Bandit. This ability triggers only once each turn. Now, to commit a crime, you have to target opponent's anything. Literally anything the opponent controls. You could also just target the opponent, and you can target cards in their graveyard. So committing a crime is playing Magic. If you're playing Magic against your opponent and interacting with them in some way, shape, or form, you're committing crimes. And so that doesn't seem hard at all. Like even just the line of like, play this guy turn 2, turn 3, remove your 2-drop and like untap this guy. You know, it seems fine. So I just think a 2-mana dork that taps for any color and untaps like kind of a lot. Like he only does it once per turn, but like, so he can untap on my turn and your turn, just so you know. So I don't know. Like I don't know. I think this guy probably ends up tapping for a lot of mana is all I'm saying. Hey, you've skipped to the uncommons. I bet nobody else did that. You're the one person that just didn't skip ahead to the rares and the mythics. I appreciate that out of you. But this is the bulk of the cards that we got to see today, and some of these are definitely standard playable. So you're doing the right thing by checking out this chunk in the video. Good job. But let's look at Rattleback Apothecary to start things off, along with Lazav, Familiar Stranger. Now, Rattleback Apothecary is 3 mana, 2 and a black for a 3/2 Gorgon warlock with Death Touch. Whenever you commit a crime, target creature you control gains your choice of menace or lifelink till end of turn. So target your opponent or their stuff or whatever, and then suddenly your creatures get a little bit better in terms of keywords. Okay, that seems fun. Probably a draft card, all things considered. That said, like, remove your guy, give my dude lifelink, get in. Like, it actually sounds like a pretty good line against aggro, but yeah, I don't really expect this thing to see standard play. I just like that line. So let's move on to Lazav, Familiar Stranger. 3 mana, 1 a blue and a black for a 1/4 legendary shapeshifter. Whenever you commit a crime, put a +1/+1 counter on Lazav. Then you may exile a card from a graveyard. If a creature card was exiled this way, you may have Lazav become a copy of that card until end of turn. This ability triggers only once each turn, because it'd be really wacky if you could do it a whole bunch of times. Like, kill that guy, becomes a copy, do a thing. Kill that guy, becomes a copy, do a thing. I mean, that would be kind of fun. But I just like that this dude grows like fairly easily, and again, just rewards you for playing Magic. That's the thing about committing crimes. Like if I just have Lazav on the table and I remove one of your dudes or duress you, or like Graveyard Trespasser gets in and targets a card in your graveyard or something like that, then suddenly Lazav's just going to keep getting bigger. Doesn't matter if he can like transform into a guy for the rest of the turn. At least he's getting bigger. And he already starts as a 1/4. So 2/5, 3/6, 4/7. Like these are numbers, right? So I don't know. It's kind of all right. And he can trigger on your turn and then your opponent's turn and just keep getting bigger. And obviously, haven't even addressed that there's stuff you can do with it too, right? Like you can... It seems to me as though there are tricks with this. So, you know, whether you're exiling stuff from your own graveyard or maybe stuff that you've killed that game from your opponent's graveyard and you're turning Lazav into a Shelly for a turn or whatever you're doing, have fun is all I'm saying. 'Cause there's obviously a lot of fun you can have with the card. I'm not like too convinced, but I do think there are some decks in the mid-range that are going to be kind of interested in it. Let's move on to some more uncommons here so we can take a look at the plot ability. We haven't done that yet in this video, and it's a cool ability, depending on the card, right? So let's take a look at Plan the Heist, Slick Shot Lockpicker, and Make Your Own Luck. Now, Plan the Heist is 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue for a sorcery. You can Surveil 3 if you have no cards in your hand, and you're going to draw 3 cards. You can plot this for 3 and a blue. Now, what does that mean? That means for 4 mana in this case, at sorcery speed in every case, you can just throw this into the exile zone during your turn, and then on a later turn, you can play it for free. Just for free, you get an Ancestral Recall that costs you no mana on the turn that you cast it. So I know that sounds kind of good, but I don't mean to overblow it. I actually think this card's kind of bad. I don't think there's too many control decks that want to spend 4 mana on their turn for nothing that turn. I think they mostly want to hold up 4 mana for like Memory Delusion, Emperor, and stuff like that. So I'm not too sure, but maybe there's a one of in your control deck. And when you see an opening on turn 4, you do it because your opponent's dawdling. They're not doing too much. They're not presenting a threat. Maybe you play it on like turn 7. You plot it, right? And then like any turn after that, you just get 3 free cards. I don't think it's very good. I've made that clear, and I'm probably talking about it too long. It's an interesting card. 3 free cards is very interesting, but I'm still gonna stick to my guns here. Some Western reference, maybe. Either way, I'm still gonna say that 4 mana to do nothing on your turn is something that most decks aren't going to be super interested in. Well, let's look at Lockpicker next here. This is 3 mana, 2 and a blue for 2/3 human rogue. And when it enters the battlefield, target instant or sorcery in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. You can plot this guy for 2 and a blue. Okay, so now we're getting a little bit better here. I don't think that I want to spend 3 mana on my turn to do nothing. I don't think I want to do that either. Slightly better than 4 mana, right? But at least when this dude comes into play, you get a Snapcaster Mage. That's sick. Like, they keep trying to remake Snapcaster Mage, and it's just Crapcaster Mage like every single time. This is probably in that boat. I'm not sure this is a great Magic card, but I'm always tempted by the idea to recast something, especially if it's a huge something that I get to recast. Like, does this go into Dimir, reenact the crime? No. Very likely is not, but I feel like I should at least mention that deck. But Make Your Own Luck is 5 mana, 3, a green, and a blue for a sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may exile a non-land card from among them. If you do, it becomes plotted. Put the rest into your hand. So kind of a draw 3 and play one of them for free later. So that looks, again, super tempting, but it's 5 mana at sorcery speed, man. The card better do something pretty amazing, but like, I guess it could, you just put like a 7 mana card in exile to plot it, and then next turn you just get it. And you also get 2 other cards. So like, it could be, again, okay, we're riding the line here, but 5 mana is just way too much to do stuff unless the card is unbelievable. But in this case, it could lead to 2 extra cards and like a billion mana value. So like, again, I could be underestimating this thing, but I just think there's probably better ways to spend 5 mana. But I also hope that I'm wrong. Well, let's move on to yet another new mechanic here, man. That's why it's important to watch the uncommons. Let's take a look at Unfortunate Accident and Dazzling Escape. Now, Accident is a single black mana for an instant. With Spree, that means you can choose, not Squee, Spree, not the candy. Look, it's modal. You can choose 1 or more additional cost to cast this spell. If you choose 2 and a black, you destroy a creature. If you choose 1, then you create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with tap. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 till end of turn. Activate this ability only as a sorcery. So, in case you haven't seen them yet, these mercenaries are kind of all over the set. These little token dorky dudes that tap to like give a creature a power bonus at sorcery speed. They're just sewn throughout the set. They're just kind of everywhere. So, that's the extra value on this. For 2 mana, you can get a total of 2 mana. You can get a guy. For a total of 4 mana, you can just kill a dude at instant speed. And then I guess for a total of, 5 mana? 3, 4? Yeah, 5 mana. Kill a guy, get a guy. Those are all good modes, especially at instant speed, but again, I'm not really sure this touches standard. It's just a cool card. A Dazzling Escape is also an uncommon Spree card. This one's white, and it costs a single white mana for an instant. You can +1 to exile target non-token creature. At the beginning of your next end step, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So for 2 mana, you get a blink. Now, if you pay an extra 2 mana when you cast this spell, you choose target creature. Destroy it if it has the greatest power among creatures on the battlefield. So again, for a total of, 4 mana in all here, you can destroy the biggest creature on the battlefield and also blink something. So that's kind of neat. But for a total of 3 mana, you can just kill the biggest thing on the battlefield, and all this is instant speed. So again, a lot of versatility on cards like this, right? I kind of like these Spree cards, and I know you have to pay a little bit more to do most of the modes on them, but again, you're trading that out with not only modality, but this extreme versatility where you can effectively choose all the modes. So I really like stuff like this, and this one in particular I think might have a chance. But let's have a look at Vile Smasher and Rakish Crew here so we can really check out the Outlaw mechanic, right? Vile Smasher, Gleeful Grenadier. Those are both job titles, by the way. People just call, hey, there's Vile Smasher over there. That's his name. Like, oh, it's the dreaded... Well, the dreaded Vile Smasher kind of works, but like, hey, Vile Smasher. That doesn't really... Anyway, these are both occupations. 2 mana, a black and a red for a 3/2 legendary creature. It's a goblin mercenary. Whenever another outlaw enters the battlefield under your control, Vile Smasher, Gleeful Grenadier deals 1 damage to target opponent. Assassins, mercenaries, pirates, rogues, and warlocks are all outlaws. So we got kind of a weird party-ish mechanic here where it's all like villains, the villain creature types are going to get a little bonus here. So I like this dude, just a couple of mana for incremental damage. So you know that I'm definitely going to be into that basically every time. It's not necessarily an Elisal Core or a Blood Artist or anything like that, but it is pretty close to a Corpse Knight in the decks that it's going to end up in, and I really like that about it. And you might also imagine that I really like Rakish Crew if you've read ahead by now. This is 3 mana, 2 and a black for an enchantment. Whenever Rakish Crew enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with tap target creature you control, gains +1/+0 till end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. Whenever an outlaw you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life, and you gain 1 life. There it is, baby. So it's a Bastion of Remembrance, my favorite exclusive preview card ever. Really love Bastion of Remembrance, and it's basically like exactly that card, right? Just in the decks you're going to put this in, all of your creatures are going to meet this creature type requirement. So it's just kind of a better Bastion of Remembrance in some ways, because the creature it gives you actually has like an ability. I don't know, dude. The card's kind of sick. I'm going to try to make it work pretty obviously, especially along with that 2-drop. What a curve. So, I don't know, dude. I think that it's actually a sweet card. Both of these cards on screen right now are awesome, but that doesn't mean that they're good. It just means that this is exactly the kind of Magic I like to play, so I'm excited. Now, moving back to the mount mechanic, I guess, for just a second, we'll take a look at Frontier Seeker and Miriam Herd Whisperer here in the uncommon slot. Now, Frontier Seeker actually looks kind of good. This is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/1 human scout. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a mount creature card or a plains card from among them and put it into your hand, put the rest on the bottom in a rando order. So, okay, kind of like a clay-fired bricks or a farmhand, ambitious farmhand. We have a few of these in standard right now, and honestly, this has been a thing that White has done for a good long time, you know, like 2 mana dude goes and gets a land, whatever. In this case, he's only looking at the top 5, but sometimes he may find a creature. That said, I don't think this dude's terrible, like even if there are no mounts in your deck. Like if you have enough plains to hit every time with this dude, he's basically an ambitious farmhand that has more power, which is always good. Like, you can't flip them over the way you can farmhand, but like, I also don't care. I never flip over farmhand anyway. I would just much rather have a dude with higher power from the get-go that can actually trade with other stuff. So, I don't know. I think this dude actually has a chance too, but it's not like a super high chance. Now, Miriam, Herd Whisperer, is 2 mana, a green and a white for a 3/2 legendary human druid. As long as it's your turn, mounts and vehicles you control have hexproof. Whenever a mount or vehicle you control attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this is only 2 mana. You know, I keep thinking, oh, this is like a commander for vehicles. And it probably is that, you know, commander for mounts. Sure, if you're into it. But I'm just saying, probably not quite good enough, especially not quite good enough to make like Selesnya vehicles awesome. Does this go like Abzan Greasefang? Is that where it goes? And like Pioneer or something like that? I'm not too sure. I mean, be sweet to have vehicles have hexproof. That would be really nice, but I'm still not sure that deck wants to play like a 4 mana thing, right? So we'll see about that prediction, but either way, in standard, unless we have like some really sweet mounts previewed, and we already don't have like amazing vehicles in this color combination, right? And I'm not really seeing it, but I do like a 2 mana 3/2 that gives you extra value as the game goes on. I like it a lot more than like a 4 mana creature like they would normally try to make this. But now we got to finish off the uncommons with what I guess I'm just calling random uncommons in the order in which I think they are good. That's English. Either way, some of these are really, really cool, but there's got to be a worst one. So I guess we'll start with Displaced Haunt, even though I think this card is cool and potentially good. I've also heard it called Unreal Estate, and I really hope that's the actual translation on this. But it's 2 mana, 1 and a blue for an enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't cast a spell from your hand this turn and Displaced Haunt isn't a creature, it becomes a 3/3 spirit creature with flying in addition to its other types. You can also pay 2 and a blue and Surveil 1, I guess, if you want to do that. I just think this card's neat, man. I think that there's a potential to play this on like turn 4. Have 2 mana up for removal or counter spells or whatever you need to do with your mana, right? And then on your next turn, just don't do anything. Just hold up all of your mana for Memory Deluge or Wandering Ember. Who cares, right? And then into your turn, you got yourself a 3/3 flyer, baby. I don't know, like that's a pretty good ways into the game at that point, but I do think there might be some decks they're kind of interested in this, especially if they get extra value out of playing an enchantment for whatever reason. But again, not like too convinced that this is amazing, but I do like sort of the design on it, if nothing else. But I say that about a lot of cards these days, which is good. That's a good state for Magic to be in some ways. I like the way some of these cards are designed. We also got to see a card that's currently being translated as Heath Rebirth. This is 5 mana, 3, a black and a green for a sorcery. Return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and also return a permanent card from your graveyard to your hand if you want to. That is actually kind of nice. Keep seeing these 5 mana reanimation spells that like do with the thing, and then they also do extra gravy. And in this case, extra gravy is finger licking, man. It's pretty good stuff, dude. Just get back like a planeswalker or an enchantment or an artifact. It could even be a boat. There's lots of stuff you get back with this, man, and set your game plan back up. So I actually kind of do think this is cool, but again, kind of just barely outside the table of standard relevance, I think, depending on what the brew is. We also got to see Lava Spur Boots here. This is just a single mana of any color for an artifact. It's an equipment that equips for 1. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has haste and ward 1. It's pretty annoying, actually, the ward 1, but it ain't hexproof or anything like that. So this is not Lightning Greaves, right? It's not Swiftfoots. It's not great, honestly. I don't know. I think there might be some standard decks that could be like kind of interested in this, right? Like artifacts decks specifically, because there's like 2 or 3 of them in the format right now that are trying to break through. So maybe like a one of Lava Spur Boots to make it slightly harder to target my Surge Engine, Ginger Brute, whatever you're trying to get, my Zoetic Glyph token, my Filched Falcon, whatever you're trying to target slightly harder, and like suddenly it has haste, which could be relevant too. So I don't know, man. I like it. I like the idea of a thing that just sits on the table after a Sunfall and gives every creature you play for the rest of the game haste. That seems like it would bug a control player too. Plus the ward 1 short. So I don't know. I don't think that it's super relevant, but again, I think there might be a build here or there, or a situation here or there that might call for it. Next is Crom, Violent Cacophony, along with Ruthless Lawbreaker here. Now, Crom is 4 mana. It's 2, a red, and a blue for a 2/3 zombie horror, which is legendary. Also has flying. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Crom and then draw a card. So, kind of an advanced ledger shredder here, but it costs twice as much, so it is more or less unplayable. It is cool, though, but still, cool doesn't get you dubs all the time. This is Ruthless Lawbringer up next. 3 mana, 1 in Orzhov colors, a white and a black for a 3/2 vampire assassin. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, destroy target non-land permanent. Okay, I like it. I do like it, man. I keep looking at these stupid LSO core decks, because of course I do. I can't stop myself, and they're just never quite as good as I want them to be, no matter how much I tinker with them. So I at least have to try this. 3 mana is honestly a little bit much for that deck, but the ability to play, this alongside Rite of Oblivion or something like that is actually pretty sweet, because I want a body that removes stuff. You need bodies in Aristocrats, man, and maybe you play your first Ruthless Vampire guy and you sacrifice your Novice Inspector to it or something like that, and then you play your second Ruthless, whatever his face is, and you sacrifice the first one, and you're just blowing up non-land permanents, but again, you're keeping permanents on the table. It feels really bad to come down on board position right now when you're playing Aristocrats. And yeah, you have to sack a creature to play him, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a bigger creature as a result. So you didn't come down on board presence in order to play a card like Annihilating Glare or Rite of Oblivion or whatever. So I think that's good. Most of the time, you're going to get a beefier creature than you started with, and you get to blow up that Planeswalker or whatever. So, or the biggest creature on their side of the table. It's all really important. So for only, in that context, I start looking at this as only 3 mana to get, again, a guy that's like somewhat okay on stats at least, and I get to blow up whatever I want. It just seems all right to me. So I'm into it, and I'm going to try it out, but we're not sure that it makes the team, but it will be at tryouts. Now, we also got to see Form a Posse and Jolene as we start to round the corner on the uncommons here. Now, Form a Posse, actually kind of interesting. This is red, white, X for a sorcery. Create X 1/1 red mercenary creatures with the ability mercenaries have. They tap at sorcery speed, give a dude +1/+0. So that's actually kind of interesting in like War Leader's Call, Like, we've already got like Iganjo Uprising, but that card kind of sucks and gives your opponents creatures and stuff like that too. So you don't really see that seeing a ton of play, but maybe, potentially, you got a thing like this and like all the mercenaries tap to give one of the other mercenaries a big bonus or something like it could, something like this could work, but really I just like making X creatures in War Leader's Call because I like make your own fireball kits. But there's also Jolene. It's a plundering pugilist here. It's 3 mana, 1, a red and a green for a 4/2 legendary human mercenary. Whenever you attack with 1 or more creatures with power 4 or greater, create a treasure token. You can also pay 1 and a red and sack a treasure token to have plundering pugilist deal 1 damage to any target. That's cool. Little outlet for treasure tokens. I got a bunch of extra ones. I'm going to slang them for damage. I don't know. That's kind of cool. And like whenever she attacks, you get a treasure token just by herself. She's like a big Magda, the first Magda, we'll see another Magda later on, but I'm talking about the first Magda that made treasure tokens. She's a little bit like that, and I think that's cool. You know, sometimes you're just going to plunge her in headlong with her 2 little toughness just to get your treasure token, but you'll usually trade with something in the meantime. So, and again, the outlet for the treasure tokens is nice, but mostly I just like a relatively meaty powered thing that also gives you a treasure token like a good bit of the time unless your opponent devotes removal to it. So not a terrible creature, but I'm not sure that it's headed straight into Gruul Legends and Standard. But let's look at my 3 favorite uncommons from the day, or at least the ones that I think are the best. These are Bovine Intervention. That's the best pun name of all time. I really think this might be the best pun name for a Magic card that they've ever done. You've outdone yourselves. Well done, in fact. Well, I'll just keep piling on the puns. But anyway, let's also look at Scorching Shot and Honest Rutstein. Now, Bovine Intervention, there's a card here. It's not just a parody name. It's 2 mana, 1 and a white for an instant. Destroy target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 2/2 white ox creature token. So, not incredible. I'm not saying this is great, but destroy a couple of different kind of important permanent types in Standard and beyond, actually, right now. This could actually be a pretty good little piece of commander removal, too. We see stuff like this. See playing commander all the time, only usually it's like 3 mana. Beast Within, and what is it called? Generous Gift and white, or something like, I forget what it's called, but still, we have cards like this already that often cost 3 mana. So you could also just you could be cynical and call this like a worse Pongify, but at least, look, Pongify makes a bigger creature and doesn't even hit artifacts. So you're wrong. But either way, I do think that abilities like this are typically pretty good, especially if you can then just clean the Ox token up with a Sunfall and like turn it to your advantage, because now the Ox it rolls into your incubator count for the Sunfall, So I don't know. Altogether, kind of all right. Probably not as good as a lot of the other options that we have for removal spells in Standard right now, but it could replace like March of Otherworldly Light in white-based control decks after that card rotates out, because you need a way to bust up artifacts. So I'm just spitballing here. Could happen. Not sure. Now, Scorching Shot is relatively simple. It's just 2 red mana for a sorcery that deals 5 damage to a creature. Destroy target Shieldred for 2 mana. Now, I still think that Witchstalker Frenzy is probably how most decks are going to approach killing 5 toughness things for like the next couple of years. So that card does exist. And I think it's probably better in like most decks, but all that said, 2 mana for destroy a Shieldred and pretty much any other like largish thing your opponent has over there, really decent rate. So like possible sideboard card. But Honest Rutstein, I again think that there's a fair degree of separation between this and the rest of the uncommons today. This is 3 mana, 1 a green and a black for a 3/2 legendary human warlock. When Honest Rutstein enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Creature spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. So part of me wants to call this Eternal Witness. And then the other part of me wants to not be fooled by Gloom Shrieker again, right? But this has better stats than Gloom Shrieker, has better stats than Eternal Witness, for what that's worth, although it's restricted to just creatures. But if you want to look at this as a Grave Digger that costs 1 less to cast and has an extra point of power and also is ramped, then I think that's probably the lane this belongs in, For just 3 mana, it gives you some form of advantage when it comes into play, which is pretty awesome. Get back your Deep Cavern Bat because they cut it down when you tried to cast it in the first place or whatever, So get back your Deep Cavern Bat, sure. And then suddenly you can play Shelly for 3 mana. You can play Aklizots for 4 mana on the next turn. Like, it seems pretty good. So I don't know, dude. Like, just the fact that this is effectively a ramp spell is probably almost good enough, like by itself. But the fact there's also just value tacked onto it, it blinks really well too. Like, yes, dude, I want to try this card out a lot. So you've skipped to the rares, have you? Or maybe you haven't. Maybe you've watched the entire video up to now. In case, congratulations. I just congratulate you for watching a YouTube video. Anyway, let's get to the rares now. And I know if you skipped here, you're down to see some good cards. That's why you're watching this video. But the problem is, there always has to be a worst rare of the day. And we definitely have that going for us today. But there's only a couple of terrible ones to look at before we get into the good stuff. So let's take a look at Fortune, Loyal Steed, and the Key to the Vault first here. Now, Fortune is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 2/4 legendary beast mount. When he ETBs, you scry 2. Whenever Fortune attacks while saddled, at the end of combat, exile it and up to 1 creature that saddled it this turn, then return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. saddles for only a single mana, but you probably shouldn't saddle it with a token, although it does say you can exile up to one creature that saddled it or whatever. So you don't have to exile a token if a token crewed it. I'm just going to say crewed it. But either way, it does have a cool ETB trigger. So even if it's only ever blinking like itself, then you're still going to scry 2 every time it blinks. The problem is, I think there's at least like 8 ways off the top of my head I can think to spend, 3 mana in white decks. Much better than this, honestly. And I do like the idea of a thing that blinks something like every turn that could get out of control. Don't get me wrong. I know Magic, but I still don't think that this is quite where it needs to be in Standard at all. So let's take a look at the key to the vault. It's a blue equipment. There's no way that's good, right? Sorry. It's 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a legendary equipment that equips for 2 and a blue. Whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, look at that many cards from the top of your library. You may exile a non-land card from among them, but the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So here's the thing, though. That all sounds nice. Free cards, doesn't matter how big the spell is that I chose. I just get it for free. Okay, that sounds great, but it's 2 mana to play this thing in the first place. And then it's 3 mana to equip the stinking thing. And what if your opponent just removes the guy when you go to equip it? It could happen. What if you can't get in for combat damage with a guy? I know what you're thinking, Dev. I got a Cryptic Cloak that has ward and it gets in for combat damage every single turn. Like, yeah, that could work, but then you have to play this on turn 2. Cryptic Cloak on turn 3, or Coat on turn 3. Turn 4, devote most of your mana, if not all of it, to equipping the key to the coat and get in with the coat. And it's just, God, you're really doing an awful lot, is all I'm saying. For not like, most of the time, not even the best result, because you're only doing 3 with the coat. So you look at the top 3 of your library, they're all lands. Or like one of them's like a 2 mana card, like it's another key to the vault. Like, oh my God. So I'm just pretty sure that this doesn't work, but we'll probably see some footage like day 1 of somebody doing something ridiculous with it. But I'm still pretty sure this is never going to be consistent. But put that on my tombstone. Well, let's take a look at the join ups next. We got Tiny Bones joins up and Vraska joins up. Now, I think Vraska joins up is the worst of these two, so I'm going to read it first. This is a green and a black for a legendary enchantment. When Vraska joins up, enters the battlefield, put a death touch counter on each creature you control. Whenever a legendary creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So it seems meant for like Finn the Fangbearer decks, like Explorer and Pioneer and stuff like that. It seems kind of neat, right? But just kind of neat. I do think a death touch counter on all your dudes for 2 mana, if you set the board up correctly, could be pretty good. It could be okay. And obviously that second line of text is potentially busted, but I just don't see a whole lot of decks actually being able to take advantage of this. Like maybe again, Commander and blah, blah, blah. But I'm talking specifically about Standard here, where even in a format where you could go like this in the same deck as Glissa Sunslayer and Sheoldred the Apocalypse and Aclazotz, and you have like all of these legends, right? And actually I'm talking myself into this at this point, but I still think it's a trap at the end of the day. 2 of the creatures I just named already have Death Touch, so I guess there's that. But look, drawing a card every time you get in seems great, but I can't be convinced. I'm sticking to it, but let's move on to Tiny Bones joins up here. A single black mana for a legendary enchantment. When it ETBs, any number of target players each discard a card. Whenever a legendary creature enters the battlefield under your control, any number of target players each mill a card and lose 1 life. Okay, so just a single mana for incremental damage right here. And all you got to do is play legendary dudes. I'm going to play legendary dudes in my legends. That sounds so good, man. One of the problems with this is that it probably doesn't go in like Thalia decks or something, right? Like you want to put this in a legendary deck that isn't all just legendary creatures. That's the issue, right? Is that like this isn't a legendary creature, but you want it in your legendary creature deck, and it itself is legendary. So how many copies do you play? Almost impossible to reliably get it on turn 1, right? What are you doing with the discard? Are you going to discard to it? You don't have to, but you can choose to discard to it. So this could be like a reanimator tool where you discard to it on turn 1. You make your opponent, pitch a card or whatever. But in that case, I feel like it's probably just right on the same par as like Hopeless Nightmare, and probably worse than Hopeless Nightmare if all you're doing is making your opponent pitch a card. So maximize the value, reanimate something, for just a single mana on turn one. You go ahead and pitch a thing you want to get back later. That sounds cool. You can mill yourself with this whenever you play a legendary thing if you want to, if you don't mind losing the life. But again, I am here for incremental damage. I just want to play a bunch of legendary dudes and this do like 8 damage over the course of the game. So I really, really like this card a good bit. And I'm talking too fast and too much about it because I'm not even sure that it's on the level that I want it to be on. But I do think that it's just cool enough and I'm going to try it out in like 12 brews. But Colossal Rattle Worm is our next thing. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 green for a 6/5 worm, but it has flash as long as you control a desert, and it always has trample. You can also pay 1 and a green to exile it from your graveyard and search your library for a desert, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. This card is actually kind of powerful, man. Like, first of all, it's a 4 mana 6/5 trample. It's kind of nice. It's kind of really nice. If you do have a desert, suddenly a 4 mana 6/5 flash, your opponent tries to slam in with their dinky little guys, and you're like, I'm just going to how does a worm flash in? I guess it digs up from underground and nobody noticed it, maybe, but you would hear it coming. There'd be tremors. Anyway, let's not get too involved in the flavor here. A 6/5 for 4 mana with flash can really mess up the opponent's game plan, like pretty obviously. And it can just try to get under counter spells or make your opponent spend mana on their turn if you're up against control. That's good because this is kind of a must answer threat. And if your opponent does answer it with a non-exile removal spell, then suddenly it's ramp for like a really good rate. And you can do it at instant speed, can't you? Have I not read the card enough? But still, yeah, you can do this at, the ability on it is instant speed. So that's kind of sick. Just anytime during your opponent's turn, ramp for just 2 mana, cast Rampant Growth as an instant. Come on, man. So I actually think this card is kind of sick. On stats alone, it's not as impressive as it once would have been. We've got stuff like Anzrag in the format, and there's a bunch of other like 4 mana green creatures specifically that probably just have better stats than this 9 times out of 10. So, I'm not sure that it's the absolute best option, but flash, trample, 6 power, ramp. Those are all pretty impressive parts of a car. But speaking of ramp, let's take a look here at Free Strider Lookout and the Magda from this set. Free Strider Lookout is 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 3/3 human rogue with reach. Whenever you commit a crime, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This ability triggers only once each turn, which is not like as much of a bummer as it would usually be because it's a really good ability, and it really only needs to trigger once a turn to be like a pretty good ability. If you play this and have like 1 mana up somehow, you play this on 4 mana and you can commit a crime with 1 mana. You don't even need to necessarily do that. Earlier I mentioned like Graveyard Trespasser and cards like it. You get in, you play this, you get in with your Graveyard Trespasser, remove a card from the graveyard, and then suddenly, boom, this thing triggers, which is awesome. It's just getting ramp off of this is going to be like relatively easy, I think, but that's why it's not like in the best cards of the day or anything, is because it might be harder than I think. Again, if you want to get any real value out of this the turn you play it, you probably have to have open mana. Otherwise, like most of the time, there's other ways to make it work, but still, you probably have to have some mana. You have to have something to target with it. You have to have the cards in your hand to actually use along with it. So there are some things you have to do in order to actually maximize the value on the card. Some stuff that has to fall in the right order. So I don't think it's like incredible, but I will say if you get like 1 or 2 ramps off of it, it probably did pretty good. Plus it's got okay stats. It's got reach, which matters more than you think, especially in a Deep Cavern Bat format, So there's a lot of stuff to like about this. But we'll move on to Magda, the Horde Master. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 2/2 legendary Dwarf Berserker. Whenever you commit a crime, create a tapped treasure token. This ability triggers only once each turn. Sacrifice 3 treasures, create a 4/4 red Scorpion Dragon creature token with flying and haste. Activate only as a sorcery. It's a Scorpion Dragon. She's riding on the boy. That's her pet. That's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And the thing isn't legendary, by the way. She can tame multiple Scorpion Dragons. Magda is probably like the baddest villain in all of Outlaw. She just rides these things. Just let her ride them. That's nuts. But a 4/4 Scorpion Dragon for 3 treasures is not actually that much to cash in, like at all. I kind of like the idea of having that sushi in play. The opponent kills that sushi, you get your 3 treasures, and you can just turn those 3 treasures into another 4/4 flyer. So it's like they didn't kill your Atsushi. That's a fun line, but Either way, just cashing in 3 treasures really doesn't seem like it's like that difficult to do, especially when you're getting treasures for committing crimes. Like if you cut down a guy, you go for the throat a guy, you duress your opponent, you do some graveyard hate to your opponent, just whatever. You target them with play with fire. Like there's a million times ways to do it in a red deck or a red black deck or whatever. So I don't know, dog. This actually seems like a really sick card to me. And in that like Rakdos deck, you could cash in those treasures for your 4/4 Scorpion Dragon, or you could cash in those treasures for like Breach the Multiverse or Italy or something like that. So Trumpeting Carnosaur. So the card just seems like kind of nuts. Like it's absolute must kill. As soon as you see it on site, your opponent has to kill this, And it's another one that you can at least get some value out of if you have extra mana when you cast it. Like on 3 mana, this plus duress, this plus play with fire, something like that. And suddenly you get a treasure token. You can do all kinds of stuff with that next turn. This is probably one of the better cards today, even if you have to wait to get value out of it. We'll move on here to some more rares. We got to look at Great Train Heist. Everyone wanted a train heist. I guess you guys got exactly what you wanted, but we also get to look at Insatiable Advice. Bars, if you say the name of these 2 cards back to back. But Train Heist is a red mana for an instant with Spree. If you pay an extra 2 and a red, you can untap all creatures you control. If it's your combat phase, there's an additional one after this combat phase, so it's one of those. You can also pay an extra 2 mana and have creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain first strike till end of turn. But you can also, if you want to, pay an extra red, choose target opponent. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to that player this turn, create a tapped treasure token. Now we're talking. That only costs 2 mana to use just that mode on the card, which is actually really slick, Jack, but obviously you can combine modes on this as you see fit. And I think it costs a total of, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It costs 7 mana to fully power up this card. That is a bit much, but for just 3 mana, it's an Anthem effect plus first strike if you want to do it that way. But there's going to be situations for just a couple of mana where you make like 3 treasure tokens. And that's going to be disgusting. So I actually really like this card. I like just about everything with Spree, to be honest. I think they're all slightly better than they look to some people. But we'll move on to probably one of the Spree cards that I like the least, to be honest. But I still think that it's okay. This is Insatiable Avarice. Did I say advice earlier? Yeah, Insatiable Avarice is in fact the name of the card. A black mana for a sorcery. This has Spree. You can pay 2 mana to search your library for a card, then shuffle it and put that card on top. Neat. Or you can pay an extra 2 black and have target player draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. So for 5 mana total here, you get Demonic Tutor. It's really Infernal Tutor or Vampiric Tutor. You put the card on top. And a draw 3 for 5. Not bad. You lose some life on that deal, but it's still not terrible. You can also just pay 3 mana to draw 3, lose 3. Okay. That's also not bad in the right situation, but 3 mana for a Vampiric Tutor isn't great, but again, there are some control decks that could probably find use for this as a one of. Again, the versatility is really there on this thing. But let's take a look at my 2 favorite rares of the day. My favorite are Slick Shot Show Off and Satoru the Infiltrator. Now, Slick Shot is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 1/2 bird wizard with flying and haste. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +2/+0 till end of turn, and you can plot it for 1 and a red. So for its casting cost, you can just plot it. I think that might be worth doing. I know that mono red doesn't necessarily want to skip its turn 2, especially if they played like a Kumana Faces Kakazan on turn 1. They don't want to plot this on turn 2. But I still think that the haste really helps make up for the fact that you had to waste, in some ways, a turn on plotting this. And if you plot this on like turn 3, when you have 3 total mana, then you can like plot this and play Swift Spear, or plot this and play Kumano, or plot this and play with fire, or whatever, Monstrous Rage. There's a lot of different options you'd have if you played this on turn 3 and it gets attacking by turn 4. And if you Monstrous Rage it, suddenly it gets freaking enormous because it kind of has like double prowess in a weird way. Like, this is great. And it's a flying creature for mono red too. You don't have a whole lot of those outside of like Phoenix Chick, so you need that extra evasion. I just think this really, really has some work to do. And especially past rotation, when mono red loses stuff like Swift Spear and Kumana Faces Kakazan, this could slot right in a more sort of evasive mono red deck. I like this card a good bit. But let's take a look at Satoru the Infiltrator next, everybody. 2 mana, blue and a black for a 2/3 legendary human ninja rogue with menace. Whenever Satoru the Infiltrator and or one or more other non-token creatures enters the battlefield under your control, if none of them were cast or no mana was spent to cast them, draw a card. So that's kind of neat, right? So if you reanimate stuff, for instance, you'll get things. If you blink stuff, they come back from exile. You can get the cards. So that's really, really sweet. Obviously kind of works with grief in older formats in kind of a gross way where you're drawing a bunch of cards off of that. So that's kind of neat. I really, really like this a good bit. And obviously it works with plot in this format, right? Because you didn't spend any mana to cast those cards. So every time you plot something and then cast it for free, you draw a card that just makes plot way worse. Like way better, really. Way grosser is kind of what I meant to say. Plus, it's a 2 mana 2/3 Death Touch, which kind of just on its own merits, or Death Touch, Menace, a 2 mana 2/3 Menace, and just on its own merits. Those aren't terrible stats, to be honest. So I know you can cut it down, but I also don't care. This probably leads to like 2 or 3 drawn cards over the course of the game if it's not properly dealt with. So it could definitely be something to this. Also, appropriately works with ninjutsu. I just want to say that because they weren't cast, right? So a little fun value there in your ninja's deck, and he's a ninja too. So I don't know. There's just all kinds of different things that this works with. Get yourself drawing some cards in standard. It could happen. So you've skipped to the mythics, have you? You're serious. You really want to see some crazy cards. Well, hold on for a second because, mythics aren't always the best. Just like the rares, there always has to be like a worse mythic of the day, big air quotes. I think a lot of these mythics today are actually kind of hype, but there are definitely some that are better than others. So we got to start somewhere, and let's double down first. Now, double down is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cast an outlaw spell, copy that spell. We actually have a spell a lot like this in standard, but I think it's like for zombies. Was it Necro Duality or something? And yeah, every now and again, like Saffron Olive or Mono Black Magic or some other like YouTuber like does something fun with these cards, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be great just because it says Outlaws. Now, that is including a bunch more creature types than just zombies. So this technically could be way better than a card like Necro Duality or whatever card I'm thinking of right now that does the thing. But still, I'm just not really convinced that I want to pay. First of all, I'm not sure I want to play blue in my Outlaws deck, but maybe this is the reason to do it. But I'm just not sure I'd want to pay 4 mana to probably do nothing that turn and then have to wait to untap with the thing and then cast my crappy Outlaw and copy. It could be good. It seems like a lot of fun jank, but I don't think it's going to be at the top tables anytime soon. But again, Tombstone Words. This could be the best card in the set. What do I know? Next, I got to do something I kind of hate to do and put the Gitrog monster like pretty low on the list of mythics from today, but this is the Gitrog Ravenous Ride. This is 5 mana, 3, a black and a green for a 6/5 legendary frog horror mount with trample and haste. And he saddles for 1. Whenever the Gitrog Ravenous Ride deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a creature that saddled it this turn. If you do, draw X cards, then put up to X land cards from your hand onto the battlefield tapped, where X is the sacrificed creature's power. So if that power was just 1, then you draw a card when this attacks and maybe put a land onto your hand. Not good enough. If the thing's power was 3, first of all, yikes, you sacrifice a 3-drop? That's okay. So if you did that, though, you draw 3. Maybe throw a land or 2 down. Like, that could get good fast, but 5 mana is an awful lot to cast it in the first place. If it didn't have haste, I feel like it would be completely out of the conversation, but it does. And it also has trample, so it's fairly easy for this to actually deal combat damage to a player. This is another one that I'm like kind of talking myself into as I talk about it, but I just think that 5 mana cards have to be even better than this to see real play in standard. But speaking of cards you wish were slightly better than they are, here's Annie Flash, the veteran. This is 6 mana, 3, a red, a green, and a white for a 4/5 legendary human rogue with flash. When Annie Flash, the veteran, enters the battlefield, if you cast it, return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Whenever Annie Flash becomes tapped, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. Now, this is 6 mana. It's not playable. I regret to inform you, yes, it has flash. I'm fully aware it has flash, which is appropriate considering that's her name too, but I still don't think that makes the card like very good. As look at all the cool stuff it does though, Dev. Yeah, I see that it does like lots of things. I totally get that. Like it reanimates a thing when it ETBs. That's pretty cool. And then you get to draw cards, kind of. Like, I'm not saying the card is terrible or anything, but I think when I see a card that costs 6 mana, it more or less needs to say you win the game on it for it to be competitive, playable at all. And I'm not even sure this is playable as a commander. I hope I'm wrong on that. So let's take a look at Selvala next, the Eager Trailblazer. 4 mana, 2, a green and a white for a 4/5 legendary elf scout with vigilance. Whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with the thing that mercenaries do. You can also tap it to choose a color. Add a mana of that color for each different power among creatures you control. So it's actually kind of slick when you consider that it's an elf. This probably goes into like standard Voja if you're playing Voja. If you're playing the big wolf that cares about elves or whatever in standard, then this will help you get to it on the next turn without you even drawing a land. So that seems kind of okay. And when you cast your Voja, you get yourself a mercenary if you care, altogether. I think that this not being restricted to once a turn is actually pretty sweet. You can just make a bunch of dudes. Like if you just cast 2-3 guys in a turn, you make a bunch of dudes. And the fact that this will eventually make like at least, what is it, tap for at least 2 mana? Yeah. Taps for more or less at least 2 mana, given that you cast a creature spell. And if you cast a creature spell, it probably taps for 3 mana, So that's an awful lot of manas. And I think this card might be slightly better than it looks, although still not incredible. But up next is Vraska the Silencer. 3 mana, 1, a green and a black for a 3/3 legendary Gorgon assassin with death touch. Whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you may pay 1. If you do, return that card to the battlefield tapped under your control. It's a treasure artifact with tap. Sacrifice this artifact, add 1 mana of any color, loses all the other card types. So that's kind of cute that you can kill your opponent's stuff and then get treasures out of it. But I think we already have a card like this in standard. I think it's a version of Gisa that costs like 4 mana. And you just get the guy back. Like maybe it's Decayed or something like that, but like nobody plays that card. So I'm not sure how much people are going to play Vraska and like pay extra mana to get the thing in the form of a treasure token. I guess if you pay the mana, it kind of pays you back because you get a treasure token. Like, maybe there's that, but I'm still not necessarily loving this over the other 3 mana options that even a deck like Golgari has right now, right? So I'm honestly not in love with this card the way I wanted to be. I love Vraska so much, but as cool as this ability looks, I actually think that it's subtly not as good as you think it is. Hey, speaking of Gisa, we got one of those in this set too. This is Gisa the Hellraiser. 5 mana, 3 and 2 black for a 4/4 legendary human warlock. It has ward 2 and they have to pay 2 life. Skeletons and zombies you control get +1/+1 and have menace. Whenever you commit a crime, create 2 tapped 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature tokens. This ability triggers only once each turn. This is 5 mana, and I think I kind of think it's really good. This is close to as good as you have to be at 5 mana to actually do stuff. But just like the other things I've talked about a bit in this video, you have to untap with it in play most of the time. Now it does have the ward 2 and the 2 life, so it helps itself untap, or it helps you untap with it in play at the very least. And I like that. Skeletons and zombies, Anthem effect plus menace. Like, I'm really hype about that. I'm glad this is the thing that cares about skeletons in the set. I've already been clear. I want skeleton, support. I love skellies, but the thing I'm really most excited about on this at least, is just like kill my opponent's guy and get 2 2/2s. Like, if that even happens one time, I think you're way ahead in the game, dude. Like, way ahead. And you can do it on your turn and their turn. Like, on your turn, I'll duress you, make 2 2/2s. Okay, on your turn, I'll cut down your guy, or I'll go for the throw your guy, make 2 more 2/2s. Do I win the game yet? Like, I'm pretty sure this is close to playable if you can get it to stick. She's not even making 2/2s. She's actually making 3 3s, which is just like, cut down your guy, make 6 power. Like, it's crazy. But anyway, let's move on here to Kellen the Kid. This is Bant colors, a green, a white, and a blue for a 3/3 legendary human fairy rogue with flying and lifelink. 3 mana, 3/3 flying lifelink. Whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, you may cast a permanent spell with equal or lesser mana value from your hand without paying its mana cost. If you don't, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. So that's really, really cute because, this works with not only plot, but also adventures and other stuff too. But it's cute that Kellen's been on adventures. So like this this Kellen works with the other Kellens. Very adorable, but this guy's actually kind of sweet. Again, just on stats alone, 3 mana, 3/3 flying lifelink is kind of nice. And then if you are doing incidental like plot or adventure stuff or whatever you're doing, then suddenly you get to free spells, man. That's all really kind of nice. So I don't hate this whatsoever. You know, I think it's a reasonable cost, reasonable stats, and lifelink is a better ability than most give it credit for. But up next, let's take a look at Rakdos, the Muscle. This is 5 mana too, but I also think this is quite good actually. This is 2 black and a red for a 6/5 legendary demon mercenary with Flample. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, exile cards equal to its mana value from the top of target player's library. Till your next end step, you may play those cards, and mana of any type can be spent to cast those spells. When are you going to sacrifice creatures, though, Deb? You just like sacrificing creatures. Hey, there's more to this card, actually. Sacrifice another creature. Rakdos the Muscle gains indestructible till end of turn. Tap it. Activate only once each turn. So, bingo right there. You know, you got, what was that, like 4 mana Vampire Dragon from a couple of sets ago that I really liked. He gains indestructible and you sacrifice stuff. It's basically kind of one of those, but even better because his power starts off ludicrous. You know, his power starts off huge. He tramples, which is another sweet effect. You know, you also just get to play cards. You just get free card advantage. Not free card advantage, but you get guard advantage. And not only that, you get to choose a player's library. It doesn't have to be your library. It can be your opponent's, but you should probably choose yours most of the time. Like, either way, though, this for 5 mana, I think could be way, way worse because it's really hard for your opponent to actually remove. They could just Sunfall it or something like that, but if they want to go for the Throated or Get Losted or like a bunch of other removal spells right now, they better hope you don't have any other creatures out. So I think it's actually kind of crazy. I know it's, again, 5 mana. I've already said that's a lot, and you have to be very good to be 5 mana and playable in Standard, but looking at the pile of stats that this is, and the fact that it's super duper difficult to remove aside from just a couple of very specific cards, I think this might actually have a chance in like Rakdos midrange, which is already a deck that plays 5 drops, and this could slot right in. Now next I want to look at Vault-Born Tyrant, Transmutation Font, and Oltec Matter Weaver, I think it's called. That's what I've got written down here. These all look like they're not standard playable, but they actually are. This is kind of confusing, to be very honest with you, if I'm being honest with myself at least. Special guests are in this set. They're not standard legal. Breaking news cards, the ones that look like wanted posters, they're in this set. They're not standard legal. That's why you get to see like Mana Drain. In case you hadn't seen that yet, Mana Drain is in this set. You can open it in a pack of cards. It's kind of ridiculous. But the cards that are legal in standard that also kind of function like a bonus sheet, because there's like 3 of them in this set, are the big score cards, they're calling them. In case you missed it, this was originally planned to be like a March of the Machines Aftermath kind of set with like 50 or 60 cards in it. They decided to scrap it because everyone hated Aftermath and just add the cards from the Aftermath set into the big set at large. So every now and again, you're going to open one of these big score cards, and they are, in fact, playable in Standard. Don't let anybody tell you they're not. Vault-Born Tyrant is 7 mana, 5 and 2 green for a 6/6 dino with trample. Whenever Vault-Born Dinosaur, Vault-Born Dinosaur. Whenever Vault-Born Tyrant or another creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, gain 3 life, draw a card. When Vault-Born Tyrant dies, if it's not a token, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. So if you can go for the Throated the first time, you can't go for the Throated the second time. You know, it's an interesting reanimation target in some ways. I think we have better reanimation targets, but gain 3 life, draw a card, have 6/6 trample, have Colossal Dreadmaw on the table. It's not terrible. And again, if it does die, they have to continue dealing with it. So I don't know, dude. I think that it's cool, but I think that mostly it's just a big green Timmy mythic trap for the most part. But you might catch me trying to make it work here and there. Now, Transmutation Font is 5 mana for an artifact. You can tap it to create your choice of a blood token, a clue token, or a food token. You can also pay 3, tap it, and sacrifice 3 artifact tokens with different names. To search your library for an artifact card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle, but you only activate this ability as a sorcery. That's kind of cute. There's so many different ways to create like clues and bloods and stuff in Standard that this could become a deck that just goes and gets like Portal to Phyrexia, but like I think there's like a million better ways to get Portal on like turn 4 than a card like this, but I still want to at least try it out. Now, Oltec Matter Weaver is my favorite of these that we've seen so far. This is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 2/4 Human Artificer. Whenever you cast a creature spell, choose one. Either create a 1/1 colorless Gnome artifact creature token or Create a token that's a copy of an artifact token that you control. So really neat. You know, you could make like a clue token. You could also make like a big token of a big dude and then copy that. Like that's definitely a thing you could do. But mostly I just like that first line of text. Whenever you cast a creature, get a creature. I think that is somewhat exploitable. I don't want to pay 3 mana for this guy and like skip the rest of my turn or whatever on curve. I don't love the idea of doing that, but I do love the idea of untapping with him in play and suddenly playing 2 dudes and getting 2 more dudes. And it's just, that sounds like fun magic. Now we are almost at the end, my friends. We've got a couple of more cards to look at today. And I do think these are the best cards of the day. Again, I think there's really a degree of separation between these next 2 cards and the cards that we've already looked at. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the final showdown. Final showdown is just a single white mana. But of course, it's an instant with Spree. Keep in mind this card's an instant, by the way. For an extra 1 mana, all creatures lose all abilities until end of turn. For another extra 1 mana, choose a creature you control. It gains indestructible till end of turn. For an extra 5 mana, 3 and 2 white, destroy all creatures. Another wrath for standard. It's yet another actually kind of disgusting wrath for standard. I know you're looking at this and you're thinking this is a 6 mana destroy all creatures, and it is, but it's a 6 mana destroy all creatures at instant speed. This is an instant speed wrath. Remember I told you to keep that in mind? That's gross. It's so gross. You just play this on your opponent's turn. What are they doing? And like, you can give one of your own dudes indestructible too, which is kind of nasty. You can give one of your own dudes indestructible for just 2 mana. Like this is a protection spell that's also like a panic button for certain decks. I think that's kind of cool too. But also just like everyone loses abilities till end of turn. It's kind of a fun ability sometimes, you know. This can also turn off like dies triggers and stuff if you are going to use the sweeper mode. So there's that to consider too. Just a lot of cool stuff. I think this card is actually incredibly powerful, believe it or not. I know that it costs 1 million mana to use all the modes, but you're not going to use all the modes most of the time. Sometimes you're just going to pay a couple of mana, and then other times you're going to pay 6 mana to blow everything up during your opponent's combat step. It's just, that's a pretty all-powerful feeling to have, man. So if you haven't experienced Settle the Wreckage, like, you don't know what a sweeper on your own combat step feels like. It feels bad, and this card can do that while also protecting one of their guys too. So I don't know. I'm not necessarily looking forward to this card existing, but I am expecting some pretty big stuff from it. But final card of the day, everybody. What do I think is the best? Well, it's kind of the card everyone's talking about the most, you know. It's Jace Reawaken. This is 2 blue mana for a legendary Jace Planeswalker with 3 loyalty that you can't cast during your first, second, or third turns of the game. Remember that from the Morrow teaser? Did you not remember the Morrow teaser? I don't blame you. Did you not see it? That's fine. But either way, during the teaser, there was a card with this line of text. I posited it might be a Planeswalker. We got it. But in any case, Jace Reawaken is 2 blue mana for a 3 loyalty Planeswalker. You can't cast it till turn 4. +1, draw a card, then discard a card. +1, you may exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your hand. If you do, it becomes plotted. You can also -6 Jace. Until end of turn, whenever you cast a spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. Okay, so you just play them on turn 4, and now you have shields up. You know, you're holding up 2 mana at that point for no more lies or a counter spell or removal spell or whatever, right? So that's obviously the play pattern with this, and that's pretty sweet. There might be ways to like reanimate him onto the table before turn 4 or whatever. There are definitely ways to do stuff, but all that said, even if you have to wait till turn 4, at least you have some shields up when you play the guy, and that's pretty cool. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. Now, here's the deal. He actually doesn't do that much, but I still think that he's great. You know? +1, draw a card, discard a card. Pretty good mode, help you filter through cards. That's always good in most control decks, but you probably have to way to leverage discarding cards. But there's plenty of ways to do that too. It's not unheard of, right? Aside from that, being able to plot cards, he can only plot small stuff, you know, which is not like Jace. Usually has big plots, but still, you can only plot relatively small stuff, but you're always going to sort of at least get 1 free card out of this guy, even if your opponent can immediately remove him. You're going to get 1 activation. If you take a card out of your hand, that means you get that thing for free on a later turn. So that can even be a counter spell. Like you can plot a counter spell the turn that you play your Jace, right? And then when you say go, suddenly it's a later turn. It's your opponent's turn. It's not your turn anymore. It's a later turn. So that no more lies or dissipate or whatever is free now. So that's also a little bit disgusting, you know? Like you can play this on turn 4, have 2 mana up, plot a counter spell, plot a removal spell, and still have mana up to play a different counter or removal spell from your hand. You see what I'm saying here? On turn 4, play him, plot a go for the throat, have a No More Lies in your hand, counter an opponent's spell, and remove their guy for more or less free. And oh, by the way, you also have a planeswalker you're ticking up. This all sounds like really difficult for the opponent to really do much about, you know. Plus, yeah, the ultimate's there, and I think he'll actually use the ultimate a good bit, but the ultimate doesn't necessarily say you win the game. All this has to be is really difficult value for the opponent to actually deal with, and I think it does a great job of being that. Honestly, I really don't want to discount the ultimate, and I do want to talk about him slightly more. So let me just on the ultimate for a second. It says whenever you cast a spell, not like an instant or sorcery, it can be a creature, you know, it could even be a boat. So you cast like a creature spell and you get to copy that too. But I imagine late in the game, that's where this ultimate does say you win the game, is when it like you cast like a Breach the Multiverse and you basically get 2 of them and then you just win. So Jace probably does help you do at least that, if nothing else. But altogether, great little package on a Planeswalker. That came out weird. Great card is all I'm trying to say. And ladies, gentlemen, wizards and warlocks and witches, that is all 50 cards from the first day of Outlaws at Thunder Junction. Are you still here? Is this video an hour long? Thanks for watching, and I mean that sincerely. You guys, these videos get longer every single spoiler season or whatever, but you guys still tend to show up, which it means a lot to me. So thanks for that. But in any case, there's a lot more to unveil during spoiler season. I'll be back around the same time tomorrow with a bunch more cards to look at. But for now, let me know how you felt about all these. I'm sure I missed multiple tricks because I didn't really go on the internet and see what busted combos these things do. I was kind of flying solo blind for this one. So just let me know like what ridiculous infinite combo I missed that takes place on turn 3 with 1 card. Just let me know down there in the comments section, because there's probably all kinds of fun stuff to be said that I left out here as usual. But just, I'll be back tomorrow. Hit me up then. Let me know how you felt about the stuff, and check out the Patreon. Like the video if you're into the video. You can share it around. Subscribe to the channel. There's all kinds of YouTube stuff you could do if you're into it. But regardless, I'll probably be right there in your recommended tomorrow. All you really have to do is just click on that video. But if you want to do any of that extra stuff, it'd mean a lot to me. Either way, I'm at this point wasting your time. We're done with the new cards. You've already clicked away. I'm talking to nobody. I love you very much. I'm dead from the place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.